Ever stood under a sky so wide your secrets felt small? Here on the Cowboys' Tales we ride the stories of the West Campfire truths, trail dust memories, saloon whispers. Gritty humans, sometimes messy. Every tale is a horizon to chase. Subscribe, pull up a stool, and maybe find a little courage for your own frontier. The wind came out of the basin with a dry chew carrying grit that stung the eyes and rasped the throat. A rusty latch shivered on the front gate of Mesquite Flats Ranch. Levi Reed set his palm on it to feel the shake travel into his bones. The signboard above had white scars where bullets had bitten years ago. The whole place wore its past like weather. He checked the chain, then looked into the stormlight. A shape wavered in the brown air. One step, then another. The figure listed caught itself on the gatepost and lifted a face streaked with dust. A woman, hat torn, skirt stiff with road dirt, lips split. Her voice came out thin and low. "Let me stay. I will work for nothing." Levi did not move. He had learned to keep still. His hand hung near the holster because habit had grown where trust had burned away. The woman blinked the grit from her eyes. Her breath hitched. She gave a raw half-smile that was not a smile at all. "I can scrub, stitch, haul water, just let me stay." The wind took the rest of her words. She folded at the knees and slid down the post until her cheek met the gate. The latch rattled against her ear. Levi stood another breath, then two. Memory came too fast. Widow's tank under a hard sky. Fire climbing the wood like it had found a ladder. A small boot in the ash. The heat that had driven him to the dirt. A ring black as cinder on his palm. He shut his eyes, opened them, and swore softly. He lifted the latch. The sound was small against the wind. He swung the gate and scooped the woman up. Bone-light fever chill. Her head rolled against his shirt. He smelled dust and something sharp like fear. Inside the big room held cold. He set her on the long settee by the hearth, struck a match, and coaxed flame into the waiting coals. Dry cedar caught with a crack. Heat licked his knuckles. He poured a tin cup half full of water and tipped it to her mouth. Her throat worked as she drank. He set a pot on ground coffee with the heel of his hand and listened to the burr of grit on metal. He kept to the edges of the room and to silence. Habit again. She slept with a line between her brows, the kind that comes from long watchfulness. Her hands said the same story. Callus over knuckle. Thin half-moons of dirt under nail. A stitcher's small scar where the needle had gone wrong. Night settled on the windows like dust on a shelf. The wind spun and lost its bite. Levi sat with his back to the wall and the fire on his left. He turned his ring once, twice, then held it still. When the clock ticked toward dawn, he let his eyes close for a moment. It felt like falling. When he woke, the house had changed. Not much. Enough to feel it. The stove breathed slow. A kettle whispered. Someone had pulled the tired curtains to let sunlight fall where the floorboards were widest. A clean rag hung from the handle of the pump. Levi stood and his shoulder answered with a familiar ache. He crossed the room and found the woman by the open door, sleeves, rolled hair bound at the nape with a strip of faded blue. She did not turn. She was watching the corral. Out there, a dark mare paced tight circles, scar along the haunch, pale eye, mean when cornered. Cinder, a name given for color and temper. "She will put you on your back," Levi said. The woman did not step closer to the fence. She folded her hands quiet and let the mare see her. It took time. The mare blew and shied and came again. The woman kept her body loose, her face calm, and her mouth moved with a tune so simple it could have been one note. "I know how to stand still," she said without looking at Levi. He watched the set of her shoulders, watched the mare watch her, a long minute held. The mare reached out, sniffed the air, and stopped. The woman did not raise a hand. She let the moment find its own size. "You should not be up," Levi said. She answered with a small breath of sound that might have been a laugh. "I told you, I can work." In the kitchen she had set water to heat, found flour, cut lard with a fork, and made small biscuits pressed with the bottom of a cup. A folded shirt lay across the chair with an even row of stitches along the torn sleeve. The smell of coffee stood up and walked through the rooms. Levi leaned on the jamb and felt his jaw loosen without his say. "Where did you come from?" he asked. "South," she said. "Far enough that I do not plan to go back." He let the rest drop. He had come to prefer what people did over what they said. He watched how she rinsed the bowl. Economical. No waste. He watched how she set the tin plates at opposite edges of the table as if the distance itself offered peace. After they ate, he stepped outside and walked the fence line by habit, checking posts with his boot, lifting the wire in his palm to feel where it had slack. The sun shook free of the last of the dust and laid hard light across the flats. In the yard, the gate stood half open. The latch clicked in the breeze like a thought he kept trying to put away. He spent the better part of the day keeping his hands busy. There is a way to hide in chores. You do not hide much, but sometimes you fool yourself. Every time he passed a window, he caught a flick of movement. A jar set on the sill with wild yellow flowers. A pan scrubbed silver. A floorboard wiped clean in a long oval where a child might have played if a child still lived here. He stood with his thumb on a knot in the wall until his breath came even again. Near sundown, a rider came up the wash. The horse breathed steam. Dust made a second coat on its flanks. Sheriff Mason Crowell eased down from the saddle, took his hat in one hand, and looked toward the house in a way that took in details without showing it. "Long time since anyone crossed your yard," Mason said. Levi nodded. Wind rasped the cottonwoods. The sheriff glanced at the gate. The latch gave a soft shake. "She's passing through," Levi said. Mason's eyes moved once toward the doorway. The woman stood just inside Hands, clean hair still bound, watching them both. She was not small and she was not frail. She did not step out. She did not step back. Mason gave a short nod like a man paying for something in full. "What is her name?" Mason asked. She answered for herself. "Ava Whitaker." Levi looked at her, then at the sheriff. Mason tucked his hat under his arm. "You have coffee," he said. "We do," Levi said. The three of them stood inside with tin cups warming their fingers. No talk ran long. Levi found he preferred this sheriff to most law because Mason could drink a whole cup and say almost nothing and still say something. "You have work on the North Line," Mason said after a time. "Always," Levi said. Mason set his cup down slow. "I hear things in town. I am paid to hear them. A man came off the stage 2 days ago. Leather duster. Company with the wrong sort. Asks questions like he has papers in his pocket and money behind him. Says he is hunting a woman who walked away from Dry Creek Gulch. Name he asks for is Ava Whitaker." Levi did not look at Ava. The room held steady. The wind felt closer all of a sudden. The latch on the gate clinked once, almost polite. Ava kept her eyes on the rim of her cup. Her fingers did not shake. She set the cup on the table so gentle it made no sound at all. Mason put his hat back on. His voice went quieter. "The man's name is Colt Jarrett." Levi let the name settle where it landed. He could feel the old ground shift under his boots the way it does when you find the edge of something that used to be a trail and now is only scrub. He lifted his eyes to the window. Out there, the gate waited, swung just off the post, the latch dangling like a question he had thought he would never need to answer again. Ava drew a breath. "I will clean the pan before dark," she said. Levi nodded. Mason held the door open for himself. The last of the light went copper on the yard. He touched the brim in Ava's direction and then to Levi. "Colt is asking in every doorway." He stepped off the porch. The horse turned its head ears high and then they were moving. The sound of hooves faded into the cottonwoods. The wind came back up soft as a hand and the latch on the gate whispered one more time. Levi poured water on the fire until it sighed. He checked the chain on the gate because that was what he did at the end of a day. He set his hand on the latch and felt the metal cool from the loss of sun. The yard held its breath and then let it go. A thump from the corral. Cinder. Ava's low voice, that one-note tune. Levi turned toward the house. The door stood open. The room smelled of soap and coffee and a little heat. It smelled like something a man could live with. He stepped inside and the latch on the gate somewhere behind him clicked once in the evening air. Morning stretched clear and pale. The storm had rinsed the sky and left the flats washed in a thin, bright light. The house breathed in a new way, not loud, not quick. A steady pull and release that showed in small things. A folded towel on the pump handle. A broom leaned where a broom could be reached. A coffee tin without its dented lid open and ready. Ava moved through the rooms like she was listening to them. She handled each object with attention, not ceremony. A pan scrubbed to true metal. A shelf wiped until the cloth came away clean. She found 3 wild stems near the creek and stood them in a chipped jar on the sill. Yellow heads turned toward the first real sun. Her tune came and went with her, the same one-note line she had used on the mare. Levi watched her from the doorway and from the yard and from the barns. He did not hover. He took long routes around corners and came back as if by mistake. The smell of coffee and wood soap sat in the lungs and made a man forget to take shallow breaths. He put his ring in his pocket so he would not turn it over and over. He did not want the old habit to be the only thing his hands knew. At the corral, the dark mare carved a narrow trail in the dust. Her hide caught light like wet stone. A pale eye rolled toward every sound. The tendon under that eye flicked when a fly landed. Ava stood at the fence and let the mare take her in. She did not reach. She did not ask. She let the wind do the talking and matched her breath to the horse. She is not ready, Levi said. I am not asking, Ava said. I am offering. The mare nosed the air. Ava did not blink. Minutes stacked. The world thinned to hoof on dirt and breath on air and a small tune barely above the wind. The mare stepped close enough that Ava could have put her hand out and touched the scar along the haunch. She did not. She let the moment stop there. She smiled with her mouth closed, then stepped away first. The mare watched her go and did not pin her ears. In the kitchen, Ava cut flour with lard and set biscuits along a tin sheet. Her sleeves rode up past the elbow. A thin white scar crossed one wrist in a clean line. Levi saw it when she turned for the stove. She did not hide it. He said nothing. He found a sack of dried beans and put a few into soak. His hand moved in the old ways without his say. We need coffee, he said. You will know where Ava said. He saddled before noon and took the east road toward Juniper Crossing. The land along the wash held to a low green from the last storm. Quail kicked up from brush and rushed the shadows. The town showed itself a piece at a time first, the stack of the blacksmith, then the roofline of the store, then the slow spin of a sign over the saloon that had not spun in years. Inside the general store, Jesse Brightman counted nails with the focus of a man counting his own teeth. He looked up at Levi and nodded once. Jesse did not waste words. Behind him, Ida Pennington sorted letters and lingered just long enough on each address to know more than paper could tell. Her eyes went to the door, then to Levi, then to the space behind him that held no one. Heard you have help out there, Ida said, and the sentence did not rise at the end, like a question. I have work out there, Levi said. Ida set a parcel aside. There is talk. There is always talk. It buys itself like candy. Levi took flour and sugar and coffee and salt. He asked for nails and a length of chain. Jesse put them on the counter. The noise in the room fell quiet in the way that tells a man his own steps. Eli Boone leaned a shoulder against the whiskey case and stirred his drink with a finger. Eyes met eyes. Words did not. Levi set a coin for each item. He picked up the sack and the paper and turned to go. Eli let his mouth bend. Never thought I would see your gate open, Levi. She is fixing what I let rot, Levi said. He looked at no one in particular. If you want to talk about that, fix your own first. The room held still and then softened. Ida gave a short hum that might have been approval. Jesse shoved an extra paper of coffee across the counter. City blend, he said, for a quiet house. Levi took the extra and tipped a hand. Outside the street laid itself flat again. He saw Sheriff Mason across the way speaking with a freighter. They lifted 2 fingers to each other. That was enough. By late day the light went to copper and the edges of things sharpened. When Levi turned into the yard, the mare stood hip-shot with her head over the fence line. Ava sat 2 steps up on the porch with her boots set side by side. She had flour on one knuckle. She held a needle like a small weapon and worked it through a torn curtain with even strokes. When she saw Levi, she set the needle aside and looked to his face first, then the supplies. Town, she said. Town, he said. He tied the horse off and lifted the coffee and flour to the porch. Did they talk? She said. He thought of how the words had died when he stood there. He thought of the way a room could change shape without the furniture moving. They did, he said. Then they worked on closing their mouths. She looked at the horizon where the sun sat low, then back at him. Thank you, she said, simple as a cup put down on a table. Dinner was stew and biscuits, and a slice of silence cut clean down the middle. Their spoons clicked the way spoons do when they have not been used in a while. The fire worked inside the stove and made soft noises like a person at rest. From the corral came the sound of the mare chewing. Levi felt the weight in his chest shift from stone to something like a bag of grain that had settled into balance. I did not ask your leave to touch your house, Ava said after a time. If I had given it, you would have done the same, Levi said. She breathed out. He wanted to ask about the scar, about what had chased her through the dust to his gate. He did not ask. He had learned that people will put words where trust can go, and words sometimes fill the wrong places. Evening came in stages. The sky took its time and the light went from copper to burned peach to the soft dark that lets a man see only what is near. Levi stepped out to check the water trough and to snap a dry branch for the morning. Hoofbeats rolled in from the wash and chose his yard. The rider slowed at the gate and did not dismount. The coat on his back held the road in it. The brim of his hat cut his face into shadow and shine. He turned the horse to ease the animal and let himself look. He took in the house and the porch and the person in the doorway and the man in the yard. He did not look at the sky. Men like him knew the weather by feel along their teeth, Evening Colt Jarrett said. His voice had sand on it. He drew a fold of paper from inside his coat. Wax had been pressed on the edge. The stamp was not the one Levi liked to see. It was the kind a mine foreman paid for. I have a warrant out of Dry Creek Gulch, Colt said. Ava Whitaker is wanted for theft and for keeping the law from its rightful work. There is gold missing. There are men who can swear to that. Signatures sit on this paper with ink that has not yet faded. Names you will recognize if you have stayed in this territory long enough. Silas Halford is one of them. Ava stood still. The wind lifted a loose hair at her temple. She did not move to put it back. Her eyes did not go to Levi. They stayed on Colt. You would do yourself good to step down, Levi said. This is my place. Colt smiled with his mouth and not with his eyes. The law likes a clean door, he said. A man who opens it makes things easy. A man who does not makes other choices necessary. Levi took a half step and set himself between Colt and the edge of the porch where Ava stood. He did not reach for the rifle that leaned inside the doorway. He let his hands hang where Colt could see them. You can ride your horse down the wash and sleep warm if you go now, Levi said. The mare at the corral blew and struck at the dirt. Colt looked past Levi to Ava. You ran a long way, he said. It ends here either way. We can tie you to the saddle or you can sit it upright. You have a say about that much. It is a lie, Ava said. She did not raise her voice. I took nothing. The man who wants me taken did not lose what he never owned. Colt folded the paper and set it on the top rail like a card in a quiet game. He let his reins slack and watched Levi as if he could read measure there. You had a fire up at Widow's Tank, Colt said. People say ghosts walk that hill. You know what it means to lose things. Do not make yourself lose another one. Levi did not look toward the ridge. The ridge had taken enough of his eyes. He let silence work for him. Colt shifted in the saddle, and the leather creaked. I come back at first light, Colt said. If she is here, I take her. If she is not here, I find her. He pointed with his chin, not a hand. There is no anger in this. It is a job. He gathered the paper back up and slid it away without a look. He turned his horse with one knee and moved down the wash at the same steady pace he had used to arrive. He did not hurry. Men who hurry lose things in the dust. The yard listened to his leaving until it could not hear it any more. The gate had stayed open the whole visit. The latch had tapped against the post 2 times and then quit. The 2 times were enough. Levi stood where he had stood. Ava stepped down 1 step and then another until she stood at his side. They did not touch. They did not need to. The air held a new weight that could be named if a person had to. Levi did not. He took the paper Colt had set aside and looked at the stamp and the ink and the line of names. He folded it neat and square and put it under a stone on the porch rail. The stone had sat there for years. It had never held anything that mattered until now. The light thinned. The mare pressed her nose to the rail and blew. A night bird called from the cottonwoods. In the quiet, the gate latch rattled once and did not stop right away. It sounded like a question hung in air. Levi lifted his head and let the sound run out before he turned toward the door. The house waited with its 1 lamp lit. The door stood open. Rain came soft at first, a sift across the porch boards that darkened the wood in thumbprint ovals. The lamp made a gold circle on the table and left the corners in a calm kind of dark. The kettle kept up a small talk against the heat. Ava stood by the window with a cloth in her hand and watched the yard blur. Her face held no fear, only a quiet that had its own shape. Levi checked the door latch, then set the rifle on the edge of the table. He did not sit. He waited until the rain found its rhythm and the house matched it. Ava turned. The cloth in her fingers twisted once and lay flat again. Dry Creek Gulch, she said. My father worked a claim there with a man named Silas Halford, dust gold at first, enough to keep bacon in a pan. Then a vein showed, big enough to change a life. She lifted her eyes. Halford wanted the life without the work. She spoke as if laying tools on a bench, one at a time, no flourish. She told of a night when the wind pressed at the door, and the lantern burned low, and of boots in the yard that did not belong. A name on a deed that did not match the hand that swung the pick. A foreman who took pay for looking away. Colt Jarrett standing in a doorway with a story already written. Her father on the floor after the first shout. A shallow grave dug where scrub would grow over it. Paper stamped clean in the morning. 1 person left who could not sign anything because no one asked her to. Levi moved to the stove and poured coffee because his hands needed work. The cup steamed. He gave it to her. Her fingers brushed his and were warm from the cloth, not from the room. He set his palm on the table and felt the groove where years of plates had worn the wood. He took the ring from his pocket and placed it there. The gold had gone dull. The circle held a scorch at one side like a small eclipse. He looked at it long enough to feel the ache appear and then level out. "You ran," he said. "I left," she said. "There is a difference when no one follows the rules." Rain thickened and ran off the eaves in cords. The yard puddled at the low points it always found. The mare shifted in the corral and blew unhappy with the way water carried smells she did not trust. Levi closed his hand over the ring and put it back where it belonged. He lifted the rifle, checked the action, wiped down the stock with a small square of cloth. The motions were careful. He set the rifle within reach again and drew a slow breath. "You are under my roof," he said. "That makes you mine to keep." Ava nodded once. Not gratitude, not relief. Something steadier. She took the needle from the curtain and finished the last 3 stitches, then bit the thread and smoothed the hem with her thumb. The rain kept up. The lamp burned even. Close to midnight, there came a knock that was not a knock at all, only a short brush of knuckles along wood. Sheriff Mason stepped in with rain along his hat brim. He put his hat on the peg, kept the water near the door, and stood without inviting himself deeper. "I stopped by the saloon," he said. "Your visitor found a table and a few ears. He had papers to show and money to turn those papers into talk. I moved what I could. The law from Dry Creek has ink on it." He tapped the edge of the table with a finger. Not a threat. A fact. Levi poured him coffee. Mason held the tin near his lip but did not drink right away. "I know men who ride with Jarrett when the pay is right," Mason said. "I can stand in a doorway and make some of them think about home. I cannot stand in every doorway." He looked to Ava and then back to Levi. "I came to say I will be where I can be." Levi inclined his head. That was all there was to say. Mason finished the coffee in 2 draws and set the cup down quiet. He put his hat back on, tightened the stamp of his mouth, and stepped out into the rain. The door closed. The house found its breath again. They slept in the same house without sharing a wall. Levi took the chair by the hearth because his body knew how to rest there without sleeping. When he woke, morning had come with a thin gray light and a sky that still leaked at the edges. The fire had settled to a red bed. The smell of wet mesquite drifted in through the cracked window. Ava had a pencil in the back of a feed sack on the table. She drew with a sure line, a slope, a cut, a stack of rock that made a shadow at midday and a shield from the north when the wind bit. Widow's Tank was a small hill with a ruined water tower on it. The wood had black along the cross braces. Iron bolts peered like old eyes. She marked where a person could stand out of sight and where sound would carry and where it would not. "I walked past there yesterday when the sky was clean," she said. "Wind shifts here at the hour when the sun clears the ridge." She tapped the paper once. Levi studied the marks and the long thinking behind them. He folded the feed sack map and slid it into his back pocket like a note from a friend a man keeps near his ribs. They worked without speech for a while. Ava filled 2 burlap sacks with sand from the wash and set them near the porch where the steps met the yard. Levi took the hinges from the shed door and oiled them, then moved to the gate and worked the pin loose and set oil along the hinge there too. The latch moved with less complaint. The chain went smooth through the loop. He hung an old bell from a short run of rawhide just inside the gate where a hand would brush it without effort. He tugged it once and the tone came clear. Not loud. Enough. Ava boiled water and poured it through clean cloth into a jug. She set 4 tin cups beside it. She took the time to sweep the porch where feet would turn and might slip if dust and rain made mud. The care was not for show. It was the way she had survived. She moved the table 2 inches from the wall and set the lamp at the corner nearest the door. From the corral came the scrape of hoof on rail. Levi walked to Cinder and let the mare smell his palm. She rolled the pale eye and then dropped her head. He clicked his tongue once and she stilled. A hammer struck nail somewhere in the distance where a neighbor worked on his own place. A hawk rode a steady wind above the flats. The day held itself back, waiting to see how people would use it. In the kitchen, Ava laid out biscuits on a cloth to cool. Levi tasted one and nodded. She broke one in half and set it on the rail for the small bird that had learned the routine. It came at once a gray flick with a thin beak and quick feet. There was a moment near noon when the rain left and the world smelled new. Levi stood with his hand on the gatepost and felt the grain smooth under his palm where storms had worked it down. He looked at the hinge and the pin and the old iron that had held through more than weather. He did not pray. He checked his breath and let it slow. By afternoon, Sheriff Mason returned rainless now and carrying dust along his boots that said he had traveled farther than the wash. He took off his hat and did not step up. His eyes moved once over the yard, the sandbags, the bell, the oiled hinge, the map corner peeking from Levi's pocket. "You have company on the trail," Mason said. "Not yet here. Not far." He kept his voice steady. "I cannot place myself between every rider and a ranch road. I can let you know what I see." Levi gave one short nod. Ava handed Mason a cup of water. He drank and set it back where she had taken it from. He swung into the saddle again and went the way he had come. The sound of his horse drifted and was gone. Evening took its slow steps across the flats. The kettle sang a small song. The mare in the corral stood calmer than she had in weeks, head low, ears soft. Levi checked the rifle not as a comfort but as a duty. Ava tied her hair back with the same strip of faded blue and rolled her sleeves. She hummed that one straight note that never had to climb to be heard. When the light was almost done, a breath of wind slid through the gate and lifted the bell on its rawhide loop. It chimed once. Not a warning, only a clear sound that drew the eye to the opening in the fence and the road beyond it. The latch tapped the post. The house held still. The land listened. The day narrowed to the space a person could hold between heartbeats. The morning opened clean after the night rain. Mesquite breathed a green smell, and the flats held the sky like a shallow pan. The bell by the gate hung quiet, a dark mouth that had spoken once and then kept its silence. Ava stepped out with a tin cup and a small knife she used for thread and twine. She took the path behind the barn to the wash where mint grows in the damp. Cinder lifted her head and watched, ears flicking. Levi saw the glance, then the calm, and went back to the table. He cleaned the rifle with a square of cloth, slow and exact. The map she had sketched sat folded in his pocket like a warm thing. The wash held to its usual talk. Pebbles clicked, water whispered under sand. The air tasted like iron and green. Ava crouched where the bank curved and picked with care. Pinched the top, leave the stem. The sun lifted an inch and set the silver on the wet edges of stone. Hoofbeats came from up the cut, not a rush, not a walk. A sound made by men who wanted to arrive at a certain time. Ava stood. 4 riders eased into view with a 5th set back a little, coats dark from night, wet hats low. Colt Jarrett watched from the rear and let the others do the work a blade does before the strike. "Morning," he said. He kept his horse at the slope and let his voice carry level. "You picked a good day to walk." 2 men slid down and moved with the discipline of hands used to fences and guns. One took Ava's wrist and found the knife in an instant. He tossed it into the brush where it showed no shine in the mint. The other tied her wrists with a strip of rawhide that had the give of a rope meant for a cow, not a person. The knot bit and held. "Where is the box?" Colt said. He did not come closer. He had learned to let people talk to him across a space. "There is no box," Ava said. "There is a story with money behind it." Colt looked up the wash to where the ground rose. Widow's tank stood there like a thing built by stubborn men. The water tower frame showed black on the braces where fire had licked it years back. Iron bolts sat like dark eyes that never shut. He nodded toward it. "We will stand there," he said. "It suits men who need a view." They walked her up with a hand on each elbow. Boots slid in the damp dirt. The tower groaned where a brace had loosened a long old man sound pulled from the ribs of wood. Wind set the crosspiece to a small creek. From here, a rider could be seen for a mile. The men set Ava with her back to a post and tied a second strip of rawhide low. Colt sat his horse and let the light reach him. He held the paper he had shown at the gate the night before. "Silas Halford says you took what was his," Colt said. "The stamp agrees. I ride for stamps. I do not ride for songs." Ava took in the faces and the way their hands held the rifles. She took in the smell of oil and dust and a faint sour that comes with a long road. She slid her heel in the dirt until her boot found a piece of bent iron near the post, a rail staple from a fence long gone, sharp enough on one end to count. "You do not ride for truth either," she said. Colt smiled with one half of his mouth. "Truth pays badly," he said. He lifted his chin, not his hand. One of the men stepped close to put a cloth in her mouth. Ava turned her head enough that the man did not get a clean hold. The cloth slipped, then fell. The man cursed once under his breath and picked it up again. Down at the ranch, Levi set the rifle aside and stepped to the door without thinking why. The house had a different quiet than the last hour. Not empty. Waiting. He looked to the corral. Cinder stood with both ears forward and her nose high. The bell did not move. The gate hung open to the wash. Levi took the saddle in both hands and set it on leather that knew him. He cinched with care out of habit, not out of delay. He swung up and moved out at a canter, then let the horse breathe and found a tougher pace. The rain had kept the ground honest. Tracks showed where riders had broken water crust and pushed into the wash. He read the story with his eyes and with the map against his ribs. Cut north. Climb when the bank goes from clay to rock. Keep to the shadow of the tower. He felt the tug of the place in his chest before he saw the black braces. He left the horse behind a low shoulder of rock and went on foot with the rifle at a low carry. He set his boots where the stone held. No rattle, no roll. The wind worked the scent around. Men, leather, oil. He saw a hat crown, then a shoulder, then Colt's horse standing as if carved. A voice drifted. Colt again. Calm. We will finish as easy as this will let us. Levi set the first shot into dirt a palm's width from Colt's boot. Dust jumped. The horse shifted. Colt did not. He turned his head a hair and looked into the rocks where Levi was not. Second shot took the hat off a man on the right and sent it into the wet grass. The man stumbled and dropped his aim. Ava bent as far as the tie would let her and pinched the rail staple with the toe of her boot until she got it up enough to catch with her fingers. The iron cut her skin as soon as it bit. She set the edge to the raw hide and worked it like she had worked thread for months. Small cuts, short pulls, breath measured. Colt eased a hand to his belt and brought his pistol to bear without haste. He fired where a shadow might be if he were the kind of shooter who relies on guesses. Stones spat. Levi slid along the rock and made the next shot count. The man with the loose hat took the round in the bicep and spun. His gun clanged, then lay still. Another man tried the left edge of the tower where a split beam gave cover. Levi had known that cover when it held different wood. He shot low and took the man's boot out from under him. The man yelped and went down hard. His rifle went off into blue, a wasted noise. Ava's wrists came free as the rawhide let go at last. She did not lift her hands. She kept them low, as if still tied, and worked on the rope at her waist. The staple cut the second line slower. Blood made the iron slick. She dried it quick on her skirt and kept going. She could hear Levi's breath in the quiet between shots and the small words a man says to himself when he has a barrel in his hands. Colt moved the horse a step to change the angle. He fired again. This time the bullet found skin. It cut Levi at the shoulder. Heat ran sharp, then dull. He pressed the stock harder to the hurt and steadied. He did not fall back. He felt the old hill rise under his boots the way it had once done when the world was fire. He let the feeling pass through and go on without taking anything. You die where you lost before Colt called. His voice did not carry mockery. He sounded like a man stating a number from a ledger. Not this day, Levi said. He rose enough to make himself a clean target and took the sight picture with care. It was not a trick shot. It was the kind of shot a man makes when he has cleaned his rifle and oiled the hinge on a gate and lived quiet until something knocks. The crack went out and came back off the tower. Colt's body jerked and slumped in the saddle. He held his seat a breath too long for life and then slid off boots, catching once in the stirrup before finding dirt. The horse stepped aside and stood with head low as if tired of the job. The two men still standing threw their rifles down like things that had burned them. One ran for the wash and did not look back. The other raised both hands and did not speak. The man on the ground groaned into his sleeve. The world went very still. Even the tower held its breath. Then a brace shifted and complained, and the sound ran down the posts like a slow sigh. Ava got the last line cut and pushed away from the post. Her palms were raw. She crossed to Levi with quick steps and set a hand to his arm without saying the word for worry. He breathed through his teeth and rolled his shoulder under her touch. I am here, he said. I know, she said. She took his bandana and pressed it into the cut. He kept his eyes on the men who still breathed. He did not tilt in his stance. Below the hill, a rider showed and rode steady. Sheriff Mason came into view with dust on his coat and the look of a man who has ridden the turns of a thought several miles. He took in the guns on the ground, the body at the base of the tower, the rope on the dirt. He stepped down and did what law does when law is late. He gathered the weapons. He checked the pulse of a man who would not need a cell. He tied the man who had put his hands up with a neat piece of his own rope and set him against the shadow of a rock. Paper from Dry Creek will not stand long in Santa Fe, Mason said quietly. He did not raise his eyes as he spoke. He watched his hands so that no one else had to. He gave the smallest nod to Levi. He gave the same to Ava. Ida Pennington came into sight on a mule with the stubborn look only a mule can wear. She held the reins like a pen and kept the animal to a pace that was half patience, half force. She took one long breath when she reached the top and then let it out where everyone could hear it. "Seems I brought a clean cloth at the right time," she said, and passed one to Ava, who did not waste it. Mason set Colt's pistol on a flat rock and laid the warrant beside it. The stamp looked dull in the light. The ink had bled from the damp. He did not put a boot on either. He let the scene hold. Levi sat because Ava pushed on his shoulder until he did. The ground felt honest under him. He looked at the tower and did not see flames. He saw black braces that had not fallen. He saw bolts that still held. He let his lungs take in the smell of wet wood and iron and a little dust. He took that in like food. Cinder called from the low shoulder of rock where Levi had left her. The sound carried in the clear air and came back softer. Ava answered without thinking by whistling the one note, and the mare lifted her head again. Mason walked the line of prints where the men had stood and where they had run. He looked toward the wash and toward the flats and toward the road beyond that. He put his hat back on his head and set the brim low to cut the sun. Levi stood. The cut had stopped leaking fast. The bandana held. He picked up Colt's folded paper and placed it beneath a flat stone near the tower. He did not keep it. He did not scatter it. He let weight make a choice for him. They started down as a small wind came off the flats and moved through the broken frame. The tower gave a last small sound and then was still. On the way into the wash, the air carried a faint chime. It was not from the tower. It came thin and clear from the direction of the ranch, where a bell hung on a rawhide loop just inside an open gate. For a while, the days made small repairs that added up. The corral smelled like new cedar. Fresh paint dried to a soft red on the barn doors. The floors lost their dullness where a broom learned the corners again. A length of chain on the pump quit sticking because oil had been carried to it in a careful rag. Wind still moved across the flats, but it came in clean and low, not as a scouring. Cinder watched all of it with the long attention of a horse. She let Ava palm her cheek, then her neck, then the hard line of shoulder that had once gone to iron at a touch. One morning she put her nose in Levi's hand and breathed there as if finding a shape she could keep. He stood still and let the breath fill the space between them. People came in ones and twos. Eli Boone traded hay and did not look long at the porch. He handed over the twine like a man who had decided where to put his eyes. Ida Pennington brought a basket lined with a blue cloth. Bread and jarred peach lay under it. She spoke with her chin, which always meant the words mattered. "I make loaves on Sundays," she said. "It is Wednesday. I chose to make too many." Ava smiled and held the door. Ida set the basket on the table and rested her hands there. "You keep a tidy room," Ida said, and looked at Levi without looking at him. "A tidy room makes a body speak more careful." Levi poured coffee for all three and left the cups without forcing any talk. Ida drank hers and tucked a folded paper under the basket. It was a handbill from Santa Fe with a seal that had been pressed true. "I sit with the post," Ida said. "The post sits with me." She touched the seal once. "It will find you in the proper way when it comes along the official line. I thought your table should hear it sooner." She stepped off the porch like someone who knew where each board would flex. Ava stayed at the doorway and watched her go until the mule slid behind the cottonwoods. Later that day, Sheriff Mason rode in with dust on him that a brush could not get clean. He swung down, tied off, and climbed the steps slow to keep from bringing the trail into the house on his boots. He held a packet with a fresh seal. The ink had dried to a brown that looked meant to last. "From the territorial office in Santa Fe," Mason said. "Orders wrapped in the kind of ribbon a clerk enjoys." He set the packet on the table and weighted it with the salt cellar, as if the wind might try to contest the matter. He did not sit. He watched Levi and Ava open the seal and lay out the sheets. The charges out of Dry Creek Gulch were void. A witness had taken his hand from fear and put it on paper. A second had done the same. The foreman's signature no longer stood. The stamp on the warrant had been matched against another stamp and found wanting. On the last page, a name had been written with the low patience of a man who knows ink is the only thing between a life and a lie. The name belonged to a judge who had ridden the territory long enough to have his own code. Mason let the quiet be the first reaction. He put his hat on the peg and looked at the light on the floorboards. "You do not owe me your thanks," he said. He scratched at his jaw with a thumb. "I would take coffee." Ava poured. Levi slid the cup. Mason blew on the rim, took a sip, then set the cup down with care. He drew a small folded note from his vest and held it out to Levi. "Names of the riders who came with Jarrett," he said. "One gave them up to save his own neck. He will sit a while. The others went different ways." He tipped his head toward the wash. "The road takes most of a man's plans and turns them into dust." Levi nodded once. The sheriff's shoulders dropped a fraction, the kind of drop a friend will let a room see when he thinks it can hold it. He finished the coffee, returned the cup to the spot where it had rested, and took up his hat. "I will see you again in the ordinary," Mason said. He meant walks and posts and small reports that held to a line. He stepped off the porch and let his horse find the yard without a tug. Work filled the gaps. New fencing on the north line. A latch hung straight on the barn. The stove learned to hold heat deep into night on less wood than it had used in years. Ava found a way to turn rags into strong rope. Levi learned the sound of Cinder asleep and the sound of Cinder awake and unhappy and could tell them apart in the dark. Toward the end of a long week, a light wind moved through the ranch and laid the grass down for a breath. Ava let it lift her hair and then caught the loose with the same strip of faded blue she always used. Levi was on the ground under the pump arm up to the elbow in pipe, working the leather cup to fit true. The wrench slipped once and pinched his skin. He swore under his breath and felt better for having used the word. Ava leaned over and squinted, then took the wrench and showed him the angle that would keep the jaw square. "Boss habits," he said. She wiped the sweat from his temple with the hem of her sleeve. "Someone has to pretend to know," she said. They did not name what had passed between them or what remained. They named parts and motions and chores. They named smells. They named weather. There are words that do the job without trapping the rest. One evening, light went to copper again, and the air found that cool that comes when the day has done its hard work. Levi saddled, and Ava saddled, and for a while they rode the fence line without saying much. The sound of leather and hoof and breathing fit into the space between words and made talk unnecessary. A covey lifted from the brush and came down quick. A jackrabbit loosed his fear and snapped the world to attention for one breath, then vanished. The gate came into view. The sign above it had been scrubbed and sanded and given a thin coat so the letters looked like they belonged to this season and not to an old one. The white marks where bullets had bit were still there. They sat smooth as if someone had taken time to sand the edges of hurt. Ava reined in and looked at the hinge. The oil had stopped its complaint. The bell on the rawhide loop hung where a hand would catch it without thinking. She touched the latch with 2 fingers. The metal felt cool, not unfriendly. "I meant to pass through," she said. Levi kept his eyes on the road and then on the gate and then on her. "You gave breath back to a place that had forgotten how," he said. Her hand stayed on the latch another second, then slid away. He reached up and took hold of the chain. He lifted it clear and let it lay along the top rail instead of through the loop. He did not speak while he did it. He looked at what his hands had made. "We leave it like this," he said. Ava took his hand not hard. The skin of her palm had tough spots and soft spots, and his did too. The fit made sense. "Home," Levi said. Ava answered in a way that left the words standing without being pushed. "Keep it open." They nudged the horses through. The yard took them the way a sheet takes light. The lamp in the kitchen window burned a thumbprint of gold on the glass. The smell of coffee came out strong even before the cups had been set to the table. A plate waited without fuss or ceremony. The weight of the day slid off their shoulders where no one had to see it fall. Behind them the latch rested on the top rail without a job to do. Wind came up in a small friendly run and made the bell speak once. It was not a warning. It was the sound a place makes when it has decided what it is. The flats held the last of the sun and gave it back slow. Cinder put her head over the fence and blew in the easy way of a horse who has found a herd and intends to keep it. The house drew breath and let it out and kept on. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.